Welcome to the Think Yourself Healthy podcast, where you meet the intersection of mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Heather Duranja, founder of Nutrition Vixen, registered dietitian, nutritionist, personal trainer, and cognitive behavioral specialist. I'm a mother, author, self-improvement junkie, and recovering perfectionist turned professional half-asser. Each week, I'll be bringing on a guest or a topic that will help you go from surviving to thriving. Are you with me? All right, here we go with today's episode. Hello, everybody. On today's show, I am going to introduce our special guest, Johnny I just fucking butchered it. Johnny Elsasser. You guys know me, and I am like so horrible at pronouncing things. So Johnny is a former Special Operations Army Ranger with a 4-combat tour between Iraq and Afghanistan, who also protected the U.S. ambassador to Iraq in Baghdad with a private firm for 5 years. Through a decade in and out of the Middle East, he has come out to now empower men to find their strength and their masculinity and confidence in who they choose to be, not what society tells them. He uses his podcast, The Art of Masculinity, to share how many men struggle universally, from special operations to everyday men to millionaires, and provide tools to teach men how to grow and persevere through their struggles. He reminds them that they aren't alone and understanding themselves is their greatest strength. Johnny, I have no words for how amazing and proud of your mission. I just think it's such an awesome thing that you're doing. And I'm so grateful that I met your wife and she introduced me to your work, because I feel so strongly about what you're doing, what you're sharing, and what you're offering men. Every single day, I will have someone come in my inbox and they're like, hey, I know that you say that, you're always gearing your messages towards women, but what about me? Like, I'm a man and I have these same feelings and I'm struggling with these same thoughts. Where do I turn? So it's really exciting to have people like you doing what you're doing so that men can feel supported, because truly they are struggling with a lot of the same issues that women are dealing with on a daily basis. They just don't feel like they have the freedom to express those things. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for being on our show today, or my show.
Thank you. And I have so much gratitude towards you for, number one, asking me to come on, which was really awesome. And the fact that my wife introduced me to you and we got to virtually meet while you guys were in Phoenix, right? Was that
Yes.
Phoenix?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I always get confused at where she is half the time because she
Yeah.
travels so much. So, no, it was really awesome. And it was really awesome to jam out with you before we started this episode and get to know you deeper, because I think you're just a beautiful human being.
Oh.
And you have a lot going on in your life where you've grown and shown that. And now you're bringing a man into your life, and he's growing too, which is really, really awesome to hear about and to see. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really feel very much in alignment with both you and your wife, Taylor. And it's really exciting to have an opportunity to connect with people across the world. You're all the way on the East Coast and I'm here on the West Coast. And we're going to get to have a really awesome conversation today that we can share with others. And I know a lot of people are going to find value in the things that we discuss. So talk to me, tell me about your mission and how this all began.
Oh man. So it really began when I was doing protection overseas. I was, protecting the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, and we had this little compound at the edge of the embassy where all of us guys were kind of shoved into that did protection. And we were supposed to do 120 days on, and then we'd get like 30 days off, right? So we'd
Mm-hmm.
get 30 days to travel or go back home. And I'd have buddies come back on a regular basis. My wife gave me an ultimatum. Oh man, my kids, they don't understand me, or they don't know me, or man, yeah, my wife and I are getting divorced. Well, how many marriages are you on? Oh, this is my third. Like, I get these conversations with guys, and a lot of them or they went on vacation and just went on a blackout drunk session, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I started hearing these guys, and as I fast forward to meeting Taylor, and she was like, sweetie, you'd be really great trying to help men realize their power, but realize their power in their authenticity. I started to look back and say, oh my God, man, these guys were all really struggling because they couldn't cope with basically who they were authentic with and be able to communicate that at home and
Mhm.
actually align that with being the best version of themselves. They were stuck in this really strong masculine version of themselves that society said they had to be, but it wasn't true with who they really were, because I'd see them overseas and they'd be goofy and fun and open and vulnerable. And it's like, why are you being this way with me, but you're not being this way with your wife and your kids? You know, so
Ah.
so it really showed me that there was a place in here for me to help men who I served with and I was overseas with and who I respected. And then that permeated to, well, there's probably a lot of men in society that are struggling with this. And then you look at like the Me Too movement and you look at what's starting to take momentum within our society, and men are really struggling to figure out where they sit and
Mhm.
how being a society is a delicate balance between owning your femininity, your masculinity, and also having enough emotional intelligence to appreciate others. So
Mhm.
it was just a combination of all that. And I was like, I guess I'm just on this mission now, because, a lot of men um, don't, I'll tell you from my perspective, a
Okay.
lot of men do not appreciate or want to listen to another man tell them how to be a man, right?
Okay.
And the only time most men really will listen to that, because I know this from my perspective, I wouldn't do this either, is if I respected somebody's background. So early on, I say my wife did psychological warfare on me when we were dating, because like I love Lewis Howes, I love Josh Trent, I love like Sean Stevenson, I love a lot of these, male podcasters out there, and I would never have listened to him in the beginning. She was like, "Babe, you need to listen to these guys." I'm like, "Yeah, fuck that. Who are they to tell me what kind of man I'm supposed to be? How many times they went overseas? How many times they've been shot at or blown up?" Like, I had this super macho chip on my shoulder, so I was like, "Fuck that." But then she started to play this stuff in the background. And this is where the psychological warfare came, and I'd hear little tidbits. I'd be like, "Shit, that was really good, man. Like, I could probably use that. Like, that's really good." And then the first book I ever read was Excuses Be Gone by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And that
Oh
just sent
yeah.
me on my roller coaster ride. So
Mm.
uh, that was where I was like, okay, let me use my background to entice men to hear a message that's coming out of some of these brilliant other men podcasters, but other men, like alpha males, refuse to listen to them
Mhm.
because they don't respect their background. Let me try to package that with my background, and hopefully I can help these guys grow.
Right. I love that. Well, I think that what you're doing is definitely unique, because looking at you, you're a very masculine man. You have this very masculine background, military based. What caused you to go into the military? Was it like you had a family history of this? Kind of what got you to that point?
No. So no family history. I had one person in my family who served in Vietnam as an officer, and that was it. Like, no
Okay.
family history in the military. My honest, truthful path to the military was as a high schooler. I had no direction from anybody on
Okay.
how to get into college. I didn't take any tests because I was like, fuck that, they're stupid. Like, who wants to take these? I was a star soccer player, but I couldn't really be scouted because I hadn't even taken my SATs or ACTs. So college just didn't even really know about me.
Uh-huh.
And I got to the end of my high school year, and all my friends, I didn't even understand. They're like, "Oh, we're going to this college and this college," and I was like, "What does that even mean?" And then I was like, "Wait, what the hell am I gonna do after high school?" I was like,
Right.
"What the fuck?" My mom's boyfriend at the time had talked to me about he was in the Air Force before, and he was like, "Hey, maybe you should just check out the military."
Mhm.
This kind of coincided with a friend of mine, my best friend, one of my best friends. He came up to me and mentioned like special operations, like Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Special Forces, Marine Force Recon. He's like, look at these guys. And I was like, "Oh, those Army Ranger guys sound pretty cool." So
Mhm.
anyways, I get into that sent me on the path of signing up, because I really didn't know what the shit I was going to do after high school. So I was like,
Okay.
okay. And I was 17 years old. So my parents actually had to emancipate me to sign up, because
Oh wow.
I went into I went into the military at 17, and I actually started basic training at um at 17 in July of like 2004.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you this personal question. Do you have a good relationship with your father? Did you have a good relationship with your father growing up? Was he kind of the role model for you that modeled what you thought a man was supposed to look like and behave?
So God no, so my dad's he's not a bad person. I would like when I look at my dad, I just look at him as like kind of uh almost just like bland. Like there's
Okay.
nothing there. Like my dad and I weren't super close, but it's not like we hated each other. And he wasn't a bad dad. He was just kind of there. He was usually out in the garage working on cars. He was a mechanic. And
Okay.
then my mom kind of like kept us in line. But we were boys in the 90s growing up, my brother and I. Then we have my younger sister. But like my brother and I just grew up in the 90s, like boys outside playing sports all the time. We literally were out all the time. So, who I really attached to was my uncle, though, who's my godfather, and he is who I molded my masculinity
Okay.
after growing up. And you know, I relate this a lot in my podcast. Is the socialization of masculinity becomes, who you look up to, and that close proximity, especially in your formative years from 0 to 8.
Hmm.
Those are the people that you tend to find your masculinity traits from and model your masculinity after.
Okay.
So mine was my uncle, and my uncle, he and I are super close still to this day. My dad's still around, and I talk to him, and
Hmm.
we're just obviously don't connect on that level, but
Right.
yeah.
So what was it about your uncle that really drew you to him that made you want to model certain behaviors after?
I honestly, I would probably have to say there was a lot rooted in that, in also like the types of movies I grew up watching as well. Like, so you look and you grow up and you, especially in the 90s, you had the big action heroes like
Hmm.
Arnold and Sylvester Stallone and all those guys. And I grew up, my dad loved them, like Clint Eastwood and John Wayne. My mom was a big John Wayne. So there was a sense of justice and authority for men that I really liked. And then
Okay.
my uncle really exhibited that because he was very honest with us as his nephews and his own kids. He was honest about, yeah, he grew up fighting in bars and stuff, and but he always instilled in us, you don't hit a woman, you protect people who can't protect themselves, you're always honest. Like
Hmm.
he gave me a sense of all those things that you would see in kind of movies, and then
Hmm.
he showed that in real life. And he always worked hard. He never had anything come easy for him, but he never complained. So those were all the things that I grew up with and said, okay, that's what a man's supposed to be. I really like this version of masculinity, and
Hmm.
that's who I want to model myself after.
So then it was easy to transition into that military background because there was that protective sense, right?
Absolutely, 100%. It was so easy because at the end of the day, in special operations, pretty much across the board, but especially in Ranger Battalion, we love to say that we were the quiet professionals. Well, the quiet professionals always went out and did the stuff that people didn't want to do, and we did
Hmm.
the things that needed to be done to protect people back here in the States, and that's how we justify, you know, going overseas and doing the things that we needed to do to stay alive and make sure that we protected each other and everybody else in the United States.
Right. So while you're doing this, while you're over there serving, and thank you so much for all of your service. I should have said that like
Oh no.
immediately. I'm so grateful for everything that you have sacrificed and done for us, for our freedom. But so while you're over in the Middle East and you're actively in this military role, do you feel like you're really authentic? Are you really being you, who you feel innately you are supposed to be? Or was there a part of you that felt lost? Kind of talk to me about what that journey looked like for you.
I think at the time it was completely authentic with who I was because
Okay.
that's what I was kind of modeled after, and actually physically got to embody that
Hmm.
where I was, and I got to thrive. And I mean, I was a sergeant by 21 years old, so
Wow.
I was leading men into battle. I was leading a squad into battle. That's a squad is 9 guys, so like
Hmm.
you're leading people into battle, and it was great to have that authenticity with who I thought I was supposed to be as a man.
Hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of that let me be a little bit self-aware because of the honesty value that it brought. But
Okay.
no, it didn't bring me into the honesty of having real conversations with myself about some of the things I struggled with. But
Okay.
I can't say I felt inauthentic with myself at that time. No.
Okay. So so at what point is it that you start having those conversations with yourself that maybe there was something missing? that you weren't honoring the internal struggle and feelings that need to come out to surface?
So I would have to say that happened after I got back from doing protection back in 2013, and I was with my first wife, and it was not like the relationship wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. It had a lot of emotional kind of abuse, more from what I feel more from her side came
Mm-hmm.
from. Um, and I started to lose my identity there, and I started to lose my masculinity there. And that's where I really struggled with, okay, who am I? What am I doing now? Because at that time I had no purpose. I wasn't in
Okay.
the military anymore. I wasn't protecting a sitting ambassador overseas. I wasn't doing anything. So my purpose was gone. The purpose that I'd known for 10 years of my life of putting
Mm-hmm.
other things ahead of me was gone. I didn't know how to put myself first. So
Okay.
I struggled with putting myself first. I struggled with the position I was in, being essentially emotionally abused, and then not being able to taught her, but she was very closed off when it came to that. I was never able to figure out what the issue was, what the problem was, and then it got turned on me a lot. So I struggled deeply with finding out what the issue was and how to fix it. And with a man, if I can't fix it, right? Most men, if we can't fix it, we lose our fucking minds. Like that's literally part of why most men lose their identity, is because they don't have something they can fix. And
Mm-hmm.
women, you guys tend to not want everything fixed. Sometimes you just want space held. We don't know how to do that. It's not innate in
Mm-hmm.
us to be able to say, let's just hold this space. We want to say, okay, I hear your problem. Let me fix it for you. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to do that. And I lost myself a lot in those years. And that's where I really struggled with finding my own masculinity again and being authentic with who I was. I would, you know, not that I've ever been an alcoholic. I've only been like a social drinker, but I would call my brother and I'd drink bourbon on the weekends and I'd barbecue out on my deck, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd completely disassociate from other stuff in my life. And I was like, that was kind of what made me happy at that time. But that wasn't, in my opinion, who I was.
Right. So you were using those things as kind of coping mechanisms to numb yourself from really being able to identify what it was that you were feeling, that you didn't really know what you were feeling, right?
Exactly. Yeah. For a lack of better conversation on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't, what you don't know, you don't know. And at the time I wasn't open, or even I didn't even have the tools. And I think that's one of the things that I really have to underline here is at the
Mm-hmm.
time I didn't have the tools, and most men don't have the tools.
Yes. So I think that there's probably a lot of men right now who are listening to this and they're identifying and saying, I don't really know how to connect with myself. I'm not really sure what my purpose is here. I'm identifying with maybe being that codependent person who feels like he has to solve everybody else's problems. Where do I start?
It is a great question. And I had a little bit of a conversation about this with our good friend, Jeremiah Campbell as well. And one of the things I think where a man can start is to sit down in silence. And this is where you have to start, because your mind's gonna, it's a form of meditation, but obviously, like, if you don't know where to start, you're probably not in a position where you could say, yeah, let me go sit down and fucking meditate. um,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna be like, well, I sit down and get quiet. And maybe this is even going to the mountains. Like, maybe this just goes to your happy place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shut off yourself from everything else and hear yourself in your own mind. What is it you're saying with yourself? Most of the time, you're going to have a lot of negative I ams, right? I
Mm-hmm.
am not this. I am not that. I am unworthy. I can't do that. I won't do this. Like, you're going to have all these negative. See how many positive things actually come out, and it's not going to be many. And I think right there is the perfect time that you say, oh shit, this conversation with myself needs to really start, because I'm being negative and I'm holding myself back from even being the man I want to be. This is where I start. It's internal. It's not external.
Mm,
So
I can so identify with that in my own personal journey, as you and I were talking before we came officially on the show. When I dated myself for that year, part of that was spending 15 weeks up in Mount Shasta in complete isolation. It was the first time in my entire life that I had ever been alone, and it was the most uncomfortable. Like
mhm.
literally the most uncomfortable few first weeks of my life. I was like, oh my God, like, Heather, just stop, like make it stop, you know, but through all of that chatter and all of those things that were circulating in my brain, I started actually being able to have those honest conversations with myself. And as I started having those honest conversations, all of a sudden the solutions, the things started coming to surface. The purpose started to surface for me. And I started recognizing what I innately really needed for myself so that I could serve my purpose, which ultimately is to help serve others. And that's, you know, kind of what brought me to this whole podcast of Think Yourself Healthy. It's kind of reverse engineering the journey I've been on. It started with nutrition and exercise. And then ultimately what I discovered is that we have to start with our mindset. We have to really tackle the thoughts, the narratives, the stories that we're telling ourselves, the traumas that we've experienced, being open to being vulnerable and honest and having conversations that aren't easy. They're not easy, but if you're open to having those conversations with yourself first, and then the other people that you want to bring into your life, it's going to be the most healing, therapeutic, authentic, loving experience you will ever have in your entire life.
Yeah. And for men, like, it's not just like, it's a practical application that both men and women have to go through. And so it's not just isolated to women need to do this. Like, men have to realize they need to do this.
Yes.
And I love that you mentioned trauma, because I think the next step of that conversation when you're internal is you need to go back to your formative years of, first, who do you identify your masculinity after for men? So this is the next step for you, for all guys listening. Once you've identified that you got a shit ton of psycho, crazy ass thoughts in your own head and that you're beating the shit out of yourself constantly, figure out, number one, where your masculinity resides, because that's going to tell you why you're beating yourself up so much. And then you need to look back into the past and figure out where those negative thoughts and I am started. Because when you do that, you can say, okay, that's where I got it from. Now I know how to combat that conversation in my own mind and turn it around. And that is where you start to piece together a positive mindset. I mean, in my opinion, that's the ground floor.
Yeah, that's bomb advice. Like, it's such valuable advice, but the reality of it is we can't escape it. You have to do it. You have to do the work. If you truly want to get to the other side or get heading in the right direction, you have to go through the darkness. You have to face the shadows. You have to do the work in order to start seeing the light.
Yeah. And I want to throw one thing in here too. This isn't just for men who want to do like huge things in their life. It's not just for men who are on the self-development path. I have a good friend at home, and he told me, he said, one of these things that self-development people always want to say is, you know, do great things, be greater, do better, all this stuff. He's like, I actually love my life. He's like, I don't need anything more. Where I'm at right now, my job, it allows me to do all the fun things I want to do, but it's nothing crazy. He's not out there breaking, you know, $300,000 a year. He's not breaking $150,000 a year. He's out there enjoying life at where he lives with the amount of money he's making, the fact that he owns a home, the fact that he's investing in his future. Like, but he went and still did the self-work, so he's happy with himself. And that's my point, is it doesn't matter what future you want, whether big or and I don't want to say small, but whether big or just kind of constant with where you're at, to grow yourself, to be happy with yourself in those moments, regardless of what your goal is, you need to do this type of work.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. So really, you know, with this whole isolation thing, it's kind of like the detaching from others, right? Is really challenging, because most of us put our identity, especially in relationships. I know for myself in the past, every single relationship I had gotten into was how I formed my identity at that time. And so when those relationships ended, I was completely lost. I was like, oh my God, who am I? You know, and then I was desperately clinging on to the next unhealthy thing so that I could justify why I felt unworthy and deserving of, you know, truly being loved and feeling the love that I needed in my life. And for me personally, I had to go on a journey of learning how to love myself first in order for me to be able to understand how I can actually receive the kind of love that innately I wanted in my heart, but also be able to give that love back.
Yeah, and if I had a big hand that I could just spread across the world and just slap every man with a fucking love hand, I would, because like love is taboo for us to talk about in
Mm-hmm.
relation to ourselves. So we are a quote unquote the realist, right? Like we're the ones that look at every situation and look at the worst possible scenario, and we think that we're doing better by doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you slap every guy with the love hand and say, dude, you need to love yourself, like
Mm-hmm.
that's not woo woo shit. If you don't love yourself, you are literally not doing yourself justice by making yourself the best version of who you want to be. And then if you're not doing that, you can't show up for anybody else. You're
Right.
not going to be 100% for anybody else. So you're literally not serving yourself and you're not serving anybody else. So what good
Mm-hmm.
are you at that point?
Right. So tell me how would you describe loving yourself? What does that mean to you?
You absolutely emphatically have to switch your negative I ams. And I steal this from Dr. Wayne Dyer because I think it was probably one of the most important steps that I took in developing a more positive mindset was these negative I ams, the times that you say, I can't have that because that's not who I am, or I don't deserve that, or I'm unworthy of that, or whatever it is. You have to stop yourself immediately in your mind and say, no, 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 no. I am worth that. What I'm choosing is this right now. Or so it's flipping the perception of your negative I ams. If you do that, you can start to create that positive mindset. And that's, again, the beginning to developing that better version of yourself.
Mm-hmm. So are you positive all the time now, or do you still have those days where you have those conversations and you have to do that self-talk?
You already know the answer to this.
I know.
I fucking lose this battle on a regular basis still. So
Right.
don't think that I'm not telling you guys this because I'm almighty fucking Jesus over here
Right.
saying I am positive all the time. No, I lose this battle frequently and often. But the difference between who I am now and who I was before was I at least learn when I lose it.
Yeah.
I at least take it for what it's worth and understand that the battle was there and I lost it. And I look at it and say, how can I change that the next time it comes
Mm-hmm.
up?
So you use it as an opportunity to learn something and then be able to grow from it, correct?
Yep. Dr.
Yeah.
Wayne Dyer says you can look at obstacles as failures or opportunities.
Yeah. I know for myself, part of this journey, because it's going to be a forever evolving journey, I'm always going to have those moments, right? Where the doubt, the
Yeah.
fear, the negative, the trauma creeps in. But the difference between where I'm at now and where I was is that when those moments do come in, I don't judge myself as much as I used to. I'm not, I accept it for what it is. I have this little conversation with myself where I say like, oh, Heather,
Eh,
that's right. That's the way we used to talk to ourselves. That's the way we used to think. But
yeah.
is that really serving us right now? Is that really how I want to feel? And ultimately, the answer is always no, it's not. And so I'm able to check myself much sooner and then redirect my thoughts into a way that's going to align with how I actually want to feel, not victimize myself and do all of the normal shit that we normally do when we're in that place. I have
Mhm.
this 15-year-old girl who has been reaching out to me on Instagram. She's been sending me a lot of messages in my inbox, and she's constantly apologizing. She's constantly beating herself up. And so I feel very much like it's my responsibility to have to model behavior for her, to teach
Yeah.
her like, where you think you're at right now doesn't mean this is the way you're going to be forever. And so I'm kind of, encouraging her to start, well, number one, stop apologizing. And
Yeah.
so she'll send me a message and she'll be like, sorry. And then I'm like, no, instead of sorry, say thank you. And so it's this ongoing process. But she sent me some messages last night, and I saw a complete change in the way that she was responding to me. And it really made my heart smile so big, because it's been a couple of months that we've been corresponding through Instagram. And already with the little bit of impact I've had, I already see her changing those behaviors. And so I think that if we could just make the effort and remind ourselves that we're worth putting the work in, that it's going to take time, it's going to take patience, it's going to
Yeah.
take compassion, it's going to take grace, but most importantly, it's going to take consistency. We can
Yeah.
get there. The journey will never end.
No, and I think to caveat that and add to your beautiful sentiment there is that if it's who you surround yourself with too. So the times that you're lower and the times that you're like, well, shit, I'm not seeing nothing's coming to fruition. Heather said I'm going to get better and I'm going to be stronger if I do this, or Johnny said that, and I'm not seeing any of it. These guys suck. Like, what the hell?
Right.
Those are the moments that your group around you, the people that you talk to on a regular basis, is incredibly pivotal, because if they're constantly being positive and they're constantly striving for something better in their own life, you're going to look at them and be like, shit, I need to be doing that. I need to keep doing that. And then those dark moments don't look as dark. And
Right.
part of that, the technique I've used here in DC, because I don't have a lot of friends here. We don't have friends in the self-development world here, unfortunately. My wife is gone constantly, but
Mm-hmm.
partly because, the self-development world is just not as big on the East Coast right now.
Right.
Um, but what I do, a technique for this with guys who are maybe scared to text message other dudes or to message DM people on Instagram, listen to positive podcasts. I swear
Mm-hmm.
to God, this has helped me immensely to say, surround myself with people who are constantly positive,
Yeah.
even though it's in a podcast. They don't have to physically be here, but I'm listening to them all the time. And that positivity is affecting my energy. It's affecting my chemical release of my hormones to stop
Mm-hmm.
with stress, anxiety, and depression. And it's to ignite the chemicals of, serotonin and what's the other, dopamine, and positive feelings, right? Like, that's what it's releasing in my body. And that helps you to get through those dark moments and say, oh, no, 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 that's right. I do need to keep being positive. It's going to come. It's just going to take
Right.
time.
Yeah, that's great advice. Also, while we're on this subject, I think it's important to have a chat about, you know, right now, if you're not feeling in alignment with your male circle, your group of friends that maybe you've grown up with your whole life, you're reflecting, you're realizing this isn't, I don't want to behave like this anymore. I don't identify with this. How does a male start to branch out to find new groups of friends?
Oh, that's an amazing, amazing question, because guys are very adverse to approaching other dudes. Sometimes we think it's just weird. Sometimes we think like they're going to get a wrong perception, or it's not going to be received well. And then on the other side of that, the guys that are accepting it, sometimes they do think it's weird, and sometimes they do get the wrong perception of a dude reaching out. So I think for guys that need to branch out or want to branch out and break away from that, in today's social media, it sounds stupid, but yes, messaging DMs are great, and IG or Facebook, listening to a podcast and then sending a message to the podcaster saying, hey man, I
Mm,
really enjoyed listening to your episode. That always gets them to respond back and say, dude, I appreciate you even writing anything, because
mm-hmm.
they want to hear the feedback. And then that opens up the dialogue between you and another guy. Or even just messaging them and saying, hey man, I listened to the podcast and I did this today, thought of you, it was great, man, or I got a tool, something like that. Those are all great mechanisms. The other thing is, don't be afraid to talk to people when you go out. So if
Mm-hmm.
you are, say for instance, you have one positive male friend and you guys are out at the bar on the weekend or something like that, and you guys have somebody next to you, don't be afraid to make a comment to the person and open up a dialogue and see what they have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably one of the most like cool things you can do, is just be social. When I on a side note, I went to Australia and New Zealand for like a month on my own when I was doing my breaks during when I was doing security. And one of the things that I challenged myself to do every day was make a new friend. I knew nobody there. I was by
Mm-hmm.
myself. I was backpacking. I knew nobody there. I made a friend every single night. And it was probably one of the most liberating things I'd ever done, whether
Love
it was
that.
male or female. I wouldn't make it weird. I would talk to them and I would make friends everywhere I went. And it was such a cool experience, but it helped me to say, oh shit, people don't think you're weird if you just go up and talk to them and start a conversation, and you can find some of the most fruitful conversations from that.
Yeah, I love that. I myself am a very social human. I'm a
Yeah.
connector by nature. And so for me, it's just, I've been doing it since I was a small child. And so for me, it's hard to understand how people don't do that. But
Hmm.
I know that there's a lot of people out there who struggle with being able to approach others and initiate that conversation. But the reality is that there's more of those people out there than there are of me, right? So
Hmm.
but we all desire to have that connection, to have that conversation, to have that stimulation. So we just have to take a risk on ourselves and kind of just put it out there and see where it goes. And
Well, and for the introvert, it's even easier nowadays because of social media. So
this
for
is
the
true.
person that doesn't go out and spend time in social settings, you have social media. You leverage that to your advantage. People, especially a lot of the people in the self-development world, they're going to respond to you, and they're not going to think it's weird that you
Right.
reach out to them, and embrace that, and then own that and say, all right, this is something I can cultivate.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So I want to bring up another thing because I know that this is relevant for myself. As I continue to evolve as a person, get to know myself better, understand what my purpose is, what I want in life, the people that I have to surround myself have to elevate as well. And so I feel like for me, there's been this internal challenge with thinking, I have this group of friends that I've been friends with for over 20 years, but I don't enjoy conversation with them anymore. I don't feel like I'm connecting with them. And I have to let go of those relationships in a healthy way. Do you feel like there's a lot of men out there who kind of struggle with the same thing? That it's hard for them to accept that their root group of male friends that they've been friends with their whole life are no longer in alignment with who they are now, and they want to elevate to that next level? What's your advice around? Am I making sense what I'm trying to get at here?
Yeah. So you're talking about, like, I guess how men are struggling with the fact that they maybe want to keep these guys in their lives, but don't know how to keep them in a healthy way, right? Is that
Right.
what you're getting
Yes. Yeah.
at? Okay. So my advice for that is, um, a lot of people want to say you just need to kick those negative people out. And I mean, that's a drastic change. And if it's
Mm-hmm.
somebody you've grown up with your whole life, it's hard to want to do that. You have something more than just a social bond with them. You have history with them, in the sense of, you have these long relationships where you've known the good times and the bad times of somebody else. It's hard to want to cut that out.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, if you want to do it in a healthy way, if you know that that person isn't bringing you up to your highest vibration, and you're having to lower your vibration to get down with them, you really need to keep those conversations maybe short, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little more infrequently.
So drawing
So
boundaries.
yeah, drawing boundaries. Maybe you used to talk to them once a week, and maybe you just don't call them, but maybe once a month. And then
Mm-hmm.
if they give you a call, not saying screen their call, but maybe let them leave a message, and then text them back. Hey man, I'm busy right now. I got some stuff. You want to talk this weekend? Like,
Mm-hmm.
start to push the frequency of conversation off a little bit, and then go from there, in building in the more frequent conversations to be the positive people in your life.
Okay. I like that. So in the meantime, while you're trying to draw the distance there, you can start reaching out through IG messages and listening to podcasts and doing some meditation. What other advice do you have for men out there who are desperate to learn how to connect with themselves and connect with other men to feel more in alignment?
Guys, do not be scared of books. Jesus fucking Christ. Do not be scared of reading. I don't care if you don't like reading, get into books. You have audiobooks nowadays. If you don't like reading, you can listen to it. I think one of the places where you can constantly have a conversation with yourself and gain tools on how to get better are books. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to worry about what your perception of somebody judging you in that conversation. You don't have to worry about that, because guess what? The book isn't looking at you, it's written word.
Right.
So get into books, and whether that means you read one book a month, like, do your best, read at your own pace, but have a book you're reading and have a book you're following up with. Like, that's the most important thing.
So what's the one book you'd recommend right now?
Oh my God. One of the easiest books I can tell men to start with, especially ones that, um, I like to think men want a more honest conversation from a real person, and
Mm-hmm.
Excuses Be Gone is a punch in the stomach from Wayne Dyer, who does not allow you to skate through, and it challenges you to think back to scenarios where you created excuses and you're like, Shh, this is so me. It's a great conversation, super easy read,
Okay.
and you'll get through it so fast, and it'll start your journey on a high note for
I'm going to
developing.
check that out myself. Excuses Be Gone.
Yeah,
All right.
it's so good, so
Well, Johnny,
impactful.
where can the audience find you to stay connected and keep coming, following up with these amazing conversations that you are narrating and facilitating?
So you can find me at johnny.elsasser or johnnyelsasser.com, sorry, and then johnny .elsasser on IG, and that's where I post all my stuff from the Art of Masculinity. And then, as you mentioned before, I have the podcast, the Art of Masculinity, that you can find anywhere that you subscribe to podcasts.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to link everything in the show notes, and I'm definitely going to you and I are going to have another one of these, because I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and offering up your advice and your perspective and just having this conversation. I think there's a lot of people who are going to connect with it, and I'm sure they're going to be reaching out to get more from you, some more.
I really hope so. And for anybody out there that wants to DM me, please, please, please DM me on Facebook or IG. I will always respond to you. And anything you got going on, I'll help you work it out or try to provide a tool that can help you.
Oh, you're awesome. Keep
Thank
doing
you.
what you're doing. I'm going to connect you with someone. I'll send you a message later today, and there's someone I want to connect you with. So thank you again for all of your work. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for coming on the show. And I've just really enjoyed spending some time with you.
Oh, thank you. And I received that. And I'm so grateful for you and your mission as well, Heather.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on the Think Yourself Healthy podcast. I'm so grateful that you stopped by. If you could just take a minute to share this episode with someone you think who would love it, it would be amazing. Take a screenshot that you've listened to the episode and tag at Think Yourself Healthy and myself at Nutrition Vixen so that I can share it. Leave a review on iTunes to let us know how much you loved being here and what you want to hear next. Until next time, don't forget to think yourself healthy. Thanks again, guys. Bye.